you for joining us. This is the news at 7 on NTAi International. We're live in Abuja. I'm Ruth Aguela, and my sign language interpreter is Deborah Dangana. Let's bring you the headlines. Nigeria's government approves change of scope of Abuja-Kaduna-Kano Highway. Reviews contract sum to over 797 billion naira. Nigeria reaffirms commitment to global green energy initiative as it prepares to transit to net zero emission by 2050. And 2021 World Wildlife Day. United Nations call for global action towards a better world. The Federal Executive Council has approved the change of scope in respect of the ongoing work on the Abuja-Kaduna-Kano Highway from rehabilitation to full reconstruction. Consequently, the existing contract sum has also been changed from 155 billion naira to 797.2 billion naira to provide for additional works to undertaken. Works and Housing Minister Babatunde Fashola announced this while briefing journalists after the meeting of the council presided over by President Muhammadu Buhari. Let's get the details now from State House correspondent Adam Sambo.
The 375.9-kilometer Abuja-Kaduna-Zaria-Kano road is a critical part of Nigeria's most important highway system, enabling the movement of people and products from the north to the south and vice versa. For the Buhari presidency, the road is key to uniting the Nigerian people and economy. And this informed the Federal Executive Council's approval for the full reconstruction of the road, as explained by Works and Housing Minister Babatunde Fashola.
Council considered and approved the request for that change of scope and the incidental cost consequence to provide for full reconstruction of the main carriageway and also trailer parks, way bridges, toll stations, additional side lanes in the built-up areas across the FCT, Niger State, Kaduna State, and Kano State, which are all served by the road.
The road project will therefore be executed in phases, with Kaduna-Zaria section to be completed in the fourth quarter of next year, while the Zaria-Kano as well as Abuja-Kaduna sections will be finalized in the first and second quarters of 2023 respectively. The minister also briefed the council on the progress of work in respect of the Highway Development Management Initiative aimed at getting the private sector to invest and benefit in road maintenance management and provision of allied services.
We'll be handing over 12 routes of about 1,963 kilometers across Nigeria. This value-added concession requires them to maintain the entire right of way, provide all of the support services, towing vehicles, ambulance services, pavement repair, vegetation control, building of rest houses. So it's big business that we expect to see.
The minister, Babatunde Fashola, explained that when the process is complete, the federal government expects nothing less than 1 trillion naira from the private sector investment. And the commencement of the procurement process, he says, will be formally advertised for those interested. From the State House, Adamu Sambo, NTAi News.
On more road infrastructure, the Senate has called for immediate commencement of work on the suspended Badagry-Sokoto Expressway initiated in 1978. This followed a motion by Senator Sadiq Umar, which observed that the road project abandoned in 1979 connects 12 states and 3 countries of Benin, Togo and Niger. The road, which was part of the 4th National Development Plan, when completed, is expected to boost agricultural activities and provide adequate linkage between rural and urban centers. The Senate resolved to mandate its committees on works, finance and national planning and economic development to meet with the management of the Ministry of Works and the Federal Roads Maintenance Agency for a sustainable solution to the stunted nature of the road. Vice President Professor YEMI OSINBAJO has reaffirmed Nigeria's commitment to the global green energy initiative, stressing that the forthcoming deployment of 5 million solar power connections targeting 25 million households across the country under the Economic Sustainability Plan is a just transition to net zero emissions by 2050. Vice President OSINBAJO made the submissions during a meeting with a delegation of the European Union led by its Executive Vice President Valdis Dombrovskis, while maintaining the advocacy that the international community should preserve financing for gas projects in Nigeria and other developing countries during the transition to net zero emission. Discussions at the meeting held virtually focused on bilateral investment agreements between Nigeria and the EU, cutting across diverse areas including technology, intellectual property rights, research and innovation, humanitarian assistance, energy access and renewable energy. The Vice President said the federal government's commitment to energy transition is firm, as it is considered an area of comparative advantage the nation is hoping to leverage while working on improving the investment environment, also emphasizing the need to leverage opportunities to build a stronger partnership with the EU in the gas sector. The Vice President said Nigeria will explore the caveat in the EU Green Energy Financing Instrument to seek better ways of financing for gas projects in the country. On his part, the Executive Vice President of the EU Commission, Valdis Dombrovskis, spoke on the importance of reviewing investment agreements between Nigeria and the EU, disclosing the Commission's plan to increase its external investment capacities. On the global scene, United Nations Development Programme says 1 billion people, could be living in extreme poverty by 2030 due to COVID-19 pandemic. Just as Saudi Arabia's health ministry says only people who have been vaccinated against COVID-19 will be allowed to perform the 2021 Hajj. Adebola Brookslyn Sunday brings us global update.
The United Nations Development Programme UNDP says the unprecedented impact of the COVID-19 pandemic could create a sharp rise in the number of the world's extremely poor population unless quick action is taken to speed up economic recovery.
The Sustainable Development Goals that will take us to the year 2030 as a milestone to essentially transform our economies. Equity, sustainability are at the heart of this transformation.
Saudi Arabia's health ministry says only people who have been vaccinated against COVID-19 will be allowed to attend Hajj this year. Minister of Health Taufik Arabia said the COVID-19 vaccine will be one of the main conditions for receiving a permit to come. In 2020, the kingdom dramatically reduced the number of pilgrims allowed to attend Hajj to about 1,000 Saudi citizens and residents of the kingdom in order to help prevent the spread of the virus. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden has said that the U.S. will have enough coronavirus vaccines for every adult by the end of May, 2 months earlier than previously expected.
Johnson & Johnson and Merck will work together to expand the production of Johnson & Johnson's vaccine. This is the type of collaboration between companies we saw in World War II.
Available data on the WHO coronavirus dashboard at about 7 p.m. Nigerian time shows that 115,579,485 people have been infected with the virus. Back home, the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC, as at 2nd March, confirmed 479 new cases of the virus, bringing the total number of infected persons in the country to 156,496, 134,551 discharged, while 1,923 deaths have been recorded. Adebola Brookslyn Sunday, NTAi News.
Well, as the world grapples with the coronavirus pandemic, global attention has been drawn to the continued unhealthy exploitation of wildlife, which is increasing risk of zoonotic diseases, climate disruptions, extreme weather conditions, biodiversity, and livelihood losses in many countries. Well, the United Nations 2021 World Wildlife Day, commemorated on the 3rd of March, is therefore a call for global action to use nature in a sustainable manner for the good of humans and the planet. NTAi Fineface has more to tell us.
Are home to some 80% of all terrestrial wild species. They help regulate the climate and support the livelihoods of hundreds of millions of people.
Our forests are both beautiful and bountiful. They offer us rich biodiversity. They provide air that is cleaner and fresher. And they are a space for recreation, for balance, and for reprieve.
The 2021 United Nations World Wildlife Day with the theme Forests and Livelihoods, Sustaining People and Planet highlights the central role of forest ecosystems in sustaining indigenous and local communities in line with the Sustainable Development Goals.
So, on this year's World Wildlife Day, I urge governments, businesses and people everywhere to scale up efforts to conserve forests and forest species and to support and listen to the voices of forest communities.
In Nigeria, the federal government is responding to biodiversity loss by increasing the number of national parks from 7 to 17 and placing necessary regulations to protect wildlife in the country.
We have regulations on control of invasive species. We have regulations on access to genetic and beneficial. We have regulations on protection of endangered species.
World Wildlife Day 2021 also seeks to eradicate timber trafficking, which accounts for tropical deforestation, address organized crime groups and illegal trade in wild animal species, which is increasing risks of zoonotic diseases such as Ebola and COVID-19. In Abuja, NTAi Fineface, NTAi News.
And joining me now in the studio to expand the discourse on this year's World Wildlife Day is Mr. Mohammed Boyi of the Nigerian Foundation Conservation. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Boyi. Mr. Boyi?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
As
now,
well.
the theme for this year's World Wildlife Day focuses on forests and livelihoods, sustaining people and planet. Tell us the importance of this.
Okay, once again, thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this interview. In fact, the World Wildlife Day, as it has been mentioned, that it was declared, to be done annually on the 3rd of March every year. And the theme for 2021 is forest and livelihood, sustaining, people and planet. I think the theme is well chosen, and it is actually very, very important because recently there is an outline or an information that was actually mentioned by scientists and other researchers that about between 200 and 350 million people depend or they live within or adjacent the forest. They depend solely on that ecosystem for their livelihood. And what does that mean? That means that the forest ecosystem in fact provide them with some products which they can take to market and sell and then earn a living. We are very much aware of beekeeping, which is in fact a very important activity which brings in money to the local community. Okay. The local communities or people make use of forest ecosystem for such activity. And even farming, soils actually in the forested areas are very productive. In fact, so farmers actually make use of that opportunity, to grow different crops. Okay, and then in terms of maintaining healthy ecological, balance, we know that animals, breathe in oxygen and gives out breathe out carbon dioxide. And this carbon dioxide, instead of going to the atmosphere and then pollute it, is actually being taken, by the forest, by the vegetation, by the trees.
Mr. Boye, let me hold your thoughts there.
Yes.
You're aware that Nigeria is still inundated with unsustainable environmental practices. We have the illegal timber and wildlife trade. Now, how can the country get out of this situation and conserve natural ecosystem for posterity's sake?
Yeah, I think we can get out of this problem if we actually embark on massive, publicity, telling people, the significance of wildlife and the need, to conserve wildlife resources. Now, we observe this day, the World Wildlife Day, once in a year. Perhaps we can also create a scenario in Nigeria whereby we can select or pick a day or a date which we can do our own, World Wildlife, Wildlife Day nationally, so as to raise awareness and tell people that, look, we need to conserve these resources. They are very, very important. We also need to engage, people in the media outfits, television, newspaper, radio, and what have you, so that they can also tell us in disseminating, these values of wildlife, in the country is very, very important.
Okay.
And again, we need to come up with policies and legislations that will, promote the conservation of wildlife resources. Is very, very important. At the moment, we have, the laws, but if you look at them critically, in fact, they are obsolete.
Okay, Mr. Boye, of course, implementation is key. And when you talked about media, NTAi is doing its part right now by creating more awareness. But very, very briefly, I need you to share with us the role of government, groups, individuals, if we must preserve biodiversity to sustain human life and ensure the health of our planet.
Okay, yes. For instance, government, their mandate is very clear in terms of, conserving wildlife. They need to, come up with policies and laws that will actually enhance the conservation of these resources, as I've mentioned. They also need to pay emphasis in engaging the communities, because there are quite a lot of, number of species that are existing outside, protected areas. So they need to engage communities so as to, in fact, ensure that these water resources are really protected. And as per individuals, we have to do, each one of us must, in fact, engage in harvesting these resources sustainably. Because at the moment, what is happening, people look at it as a God-given, resources. So they just harvest the resources anyhow, unsustainably. But as an individual, you have to look at it carefully. Some years back, these wildlife, in fact, they are very much around. Almost even if you go outside a village, you will encounter maybe with a hare, a rabbit, or an antelope. But these days, the situation have changed. So what does that mean? That means that people have been harvesting these resources on an unsustainable manner. So we need to change that attitude.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mohammed Boye. Of course, we have to play our own role by, preserving their habitation. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure coming here as well.
All right, let's go on a break over back. Stay tuned.
I am there now. Are you sure this will work? Pastor, I can't miss these guys getting trouble. Just keep your phone on so I can listen.
Today we're going to be discussing sleep disorder. What is the medical term for sleepwalking?
Sonambulism.
Correct.
Get free Intel to Intel calls and experience HD quality conversations every time. Intel. Live more.
Thank you for staying tuned. Amalgamated Union of Foodstuff and Cattle Dealers of Nigeria has suspended its strike on food distribution to some parts of the country. This came up after intensive negotiation between the leaders of the group and the governor of Kogi State, Yahya Bello, who was assigned by President Muhammadu Buhari to look for the way forward as the strike impacts various sectors of food production and supply chain, which affected the nation's economy directly. Malam Tahir Mohammed, the chairman of the amalgamated unions, says that they decided to call up the strike as a result of intensive discussion with the stakeholders assigned by federal government to intervene and provide the solutions to the problems, including their needs for better businesses in the country. We'll bring you the details in our subsequent bulletin. Let's look at electoral matters. The Independent National Electoral Commission has identified lack of access to polling units as a major challenge facing the electoral process in Nigeria. Chairman of the Commission, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, stated this during an engagement with the National Assembly Joint Committee on INEC and Electoral Matters on how best to give Nigerians access to vote. Dayo Gunshola reports.
Of polling units created since 1999, according to INEC, has continued to create a crisis of access to vote among Nigerians, with many negative impacts.
The National Assembly should know that the Commission is making efforts to build a national consensus to solve the crisis, learning from previous unsuccessful attempts. And then we want the National Assembly to support the Commission to convert existing voting points to polling units and to relocate some of them to underserved areas.
The leadership of the National Assembly expressed readiness to support the Commission to deliver on its mandate.
We are going to be up and doing. We'll make sure we provide for INEC those resources that will make you perform your work wonderfully well.
To design and adopt a decision-making model that builds confidence and gives people the confidence to accept that this process is not designed to benefit one group.
INEC promised to continue its engagements with critical stakeholders until adequate access is created for all Nigerians to vote. From the National Assembly, Dayo Gunshola, NTAi News.
Federal government approves the establishment of SIM swap centers and the extension of their enrollment license tenure. The Ministerial Task Force on the NIN SIM registration chaired by Minister of Communications and Digital Economy has, at a fourth review meeting, approved the establishment of dedicated SIM swap centers across the local government areas by telecommunications companies. A joint statement by NIMSI's head of corporate communications, Kayode Adegoke, and Director of Public Affairs, Nigerian Communications Commission, indicates that approval was also given for the extension of the tenure of NIN enrollment agent licenses for the telcos from 1 to 5 years in consideration of their satisfactory performance, subject to continuous monitoring. This is a deliberate effort of the federal government to simplify the enrollment process for Nigerians and legal residents. The technical committee has, however, mandated to complete the development of a new SIM issuance strategy that cannot be compromised, especially through pre-registration by some agents, while a multi-sectoral ad hoc committee has been tasked to immediately complete the review of the processes for new SIM activations for legal residents staying in Nigeria for less than 24 months. Membership of the committee was drawn from NCC, NIMSI, Nigeria Immigration Service, and the Association of Licensed Telecoms Operators of Nigeria. The federal government expects that these measures will bring SIM swap centers closer to Nigerians, regardless of their location. The Federal Inland Revenue Service has resolved to put in place an improved technology for automated tax collection in the year 2021. This is contained in a submission by the chairman of the service, Mohammed Nami, on the budget target before the Senate Committee on Finance. National Assembly correspondent Abdullahi Hamino reports.
The primary objective of the 2021 budget by the Federal Inland Revenue Service, according to Mohammed Nami, is to achieve optimal assessment and collection of tax for the federal government. The possibility of marginal reduction in the taxable income of taxpayers due to the effect of COVID-19 pandemic, according to him, is what necessitated the new strategies.
We already have the workforce. We will now open this rural tax offices in about 160 locations and send staff that are currently not doing enough in the offices to those locations so that we're able to improve on our tax collection.
We have listened to you. This is the first leg of the transaction. The second leg is into the nitty-gritty of what is contained in this document.
The committee appreciated the effort of the FIRS towards achieving 7% non-oil revenue in 2021 as against the 4% in 2020. From the National Assembly, Abdullahi Aminu, NTAi News.
Efforts have continued towards the quest for a more accountable Nigeria police force, particularly in the area of human rights violations. Part of such efforts came again this week through a situation room update held in Abuja between human rights, civil society organizations and the Nigeria police. Femi Okewo reports.
This is not the first attempt to inculcate into the Nigerian police human rights values and tenets. In fact, for as far back as 2010-2011, various civil society bodies like Power, sponsored by foreign donors, had taken the human rights gospel round all police formations across Nigeria. In fact, human rights courses are part of the curriculum of the Police Staff College in Wudil. But with the NSAS outburst by the Nigerian population, the civil society organizations and indeed the Nigerian police acknowledge that there's so much to be done. So, at the safe situation room held in Abuja, both the police and several concerned civil society organizations put on the discussion table other areas that need to be tackled.
We believe strongly that accountability is one of the key measures or key ways of curbing impunity. Impunity with regards to human rights violations by security agencies, not limited, of course, to the Nigerian police. Having a transparent, efficient system will go a long way in improving enjoyment of human rights.
We don't want to run into the same pitfall that SARS fell into by reason of duplicity. What we're trying to do is to make sure that if we're going to replicate ourselves across the states, we have to do that carefully.
With the signing of the Police Act in 2020, the first review of the police since 1948, stakeholders hope that problematic areas of police operations will now be easier to pick out. In Abuja, Femi Okewo, NTAi News.
And just before we go, let's find out how tomorrow's weather will fare. That's the news. Thanks for your time with us. I'm Ruth Aguwele and my sign language interpreter is Deborah Dangana. But let's also remind you to keep the fight on against rape and rapists. Bye.